think I didn't have as many memories because what happened with the adult happened over the course of a few years, and this happened like not as many times. So I didn't have as many memories. So therefore, they didn't think that there was enough evidence to do anything. And I remember speaking to my psychologist in year 12 about this, and she was trying to distinguish whether it was what she called healthy child curiosity. I think that's a very harmful phrase. I don't think that kids are just experimenting, because there's so many conceptions about child and child. It's not curiosity or experimenting or trying to figure things out. If a child is doing that, it's serious. I think it happens so often, child on child sexual abuse, but it's never spoken about.
Welcome to Conversations with Kristi. I'm Kristi McVie, a former WA police officer, specialist child interviewer and child abuse detective. For years, I worked on the front lines investigating child sexual abuse, where I saw the risks, the patterns, and most importantly, the ways that we can protect our kids. Now I'm here to share that knowledge with you. This podcast is all about real conversations, giving parents, carers, and educators the tools to keep their kids safe, both in person and online. Through survivor stories, expert insights, and practical advice, we'll navigate these tough topics together so you feel informed, confident, and empowered. Because when we know better, we can do better, and our kids deserve nothing less. Content warning. Some topics and conversations can be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised, as your mental health is important. Please refer to my website and the show notes for available support services. Hello and welcome back to Conversations with Kristi. I am so happy to be here on this Friday morning, or Friday lunchtime actually for me, and we are back talking about child abuse prevention and education and just having general conversations around how we can keep our families safe and how we can learn from all of the amazing victim survivors and advocates that are in our spaces, in our communities. And today I'm going to be talking with Lauren. Lauren and I connected again through LinkedIn. I'm so grateful for all of these people I meet on LinkedIn. I learned so much from all of the people that are both advocates and educators and victim survivors, and people working so tirelessly to help us protect our kids, help us learn from the errors and mistakes of the past, learn from like what they've been through. So Lauren, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the amazing work that you do. Yeah.
I just talk. I'm a very, the thing, I think I started the podcast thinking I can talk. I love talking, obviously. This is the third season. I love listening to, I love hearing stories. So Lauren, I guess just to get started, you reached out and said you're a victim survivor and that you've had a pretty interesting journey, I guess. You know, some not so great things have happened, some not so great experiences, but also that you've turned that into, and I was thinking about this before we jumped on, I was thinking about the fact that you turned your experiences into power because now you're actually doing something with what happened to you. So for my listeners and for the Conversations with Kristi podcast listeners, can you tell us about you and what's led you to where you are now?
So my name's Lauren. I am currently studying psychology. I'm in my third year. Just before I started university, actually, during year 12, I went through the disclosure process of child sexual abuse, and navigating that while doing my HSC, which is the New South Wales high school certificate, was pretty stressful to say the least, but I've tried to use it for a positive way and hopefully be a psychologist one day once I keep studying. It takes a long time, but I'm trying to volunteer with Lifeline and services like that, as well as this wonderful organization called What Were You Wearing, which is founded by Sarah Williams. I help run their survivor healing groups. So I'm really trying to use my experience and my court and police journey to try and help other people, I guess, because I think it just makes what you've gone through a little bit more, it's better to know that you're trying to help other people, which I kind of hope I'm doing and will continue to do, but otherwise it kind of feels pointless. Not that it should have happened, but just making it mean something to me at least. Yeah.
Wow. Big shock there that you went through that process whilst trying to finish school. My own daughter is 17, finishing her year 12 at the moment, trying to finish and get her certificate right now. And I know how stressed she is and how, she just keeps thinking, yeah, it's just a crazy year. So to go through that process in that year is my hat's off to you, because that would have been, yeah, your head would have been all over the place. And now you're studying to become a psychologist. So you've obviously, you're a driven young woman to be in that space and to do that work, plus, everything
Thank you
you've
so
been through
much.
as well.
Yeah, I think year 12 is definitely a difficult year, and I don't know, it's been a bit difficult making it through high school and uni, but I guess somewhat of my resilience comes from trying to help people make it in a useful way, I guess. And I'm grateful for places like this to be able to talk about
Yeah.
it. I'm very passionate about trauma-informed care now, which is quite a serious topic to be
Mm.
passionate about at 20, but I think that would have been very helpful for me and something that I hope that I can use for other people in the future.
Yeah, well, and with you saying trauma-informed care, I know that when I was a police officer, we didn't talk about that. I mean, I've been out of the police for 5 years now, but even I could have used better training. I know that I could have used better training, better resources. I could have just had I had that information when I was in the police, or more so, I just would have done a better job. And I think I did a really good job for some of it. Like, I went off my intuition and my instincts a lot of the time on how to help people and to listen. Trauma creates so many different reactions that might seem like something else, but it's actually trauma. And I wish I had known that before. So I really, really honor the fact that you want to help change the landscape with trauma informed care and stuff like that, because I wish I had have had that information sooner. So talking about trauma-informed care and your journey, I guess the best way to explain why you're passionate about it is to share with us what happened for you to get you to the point where you think, wow, I need to help them learn this stuff, or I need to push this trauma-informed care forward, because your journey wasn't so great.
Yeah, and it is difficult, especially for police. I don't think that there is that training. I think you can definitely do the best that you can, which I'm sure you did. It's a very kind of difficult area to implement. So I guess when I'd first disclosed it in year 11 to my psychologist, and I was told that obviously because I was under 18, it had to be reported. They were mandatory reporters. I didn't really have a say in that. So you had to come up with 3 main memories. And I remember telling my psychologist, okay, well, firstly, trauma-informed care and psychology. I think I want to preface by saying there are so many amazing psychologists and police and lawyers, and I'm not trying to say that there aren't. Just from my personal experience, saying memories and them kind of being dismissed, or I don't think it's possible for you to have that memory, or I think you're remembering it wrong kind of thing. It's not very helpful to hear, I guess. So I didn't really have a choice in going to the police. But when I was there was at first a wonderful detective. She was so understanding and so helpful. She unfortunately had an injury. I got switched to another police officer. And I guess the main interaction that kind of was the catalyst for all this talk about trauma-informed care was I got an email from her one day, and she said, I'm happy to come closer to you, but there's an update on your case. I'd love to talk to you about it. And I remember that day so clearly because I was in such a happy mood that day. Sort of where I was in the case was I've told my story multiple times, and we'd kind of written a police report about it. In regards, so I have 2 perpetrators. One of them, the adult on-child perpetrator, that was the main thing. I guess that's another thing to mention. Even though there were 2 perpetrators, only one was taken more seriously, I guess. And
Yeah.
she said that she'll get in contact with me because we were going to try and set up a system where I would call the perpetrator and try and get a confession, but they had to speak to the lawyer team to determine if there was enough evidence to actually do that. So I went to the interview that day, and she said that there wasn't enough evidence, and it was my fault that the court process couldn't go forward because my memory, like the details of my story slightly changed every time I spoke about it. So she's like, the lawyers don't think that there's a strong enough case because you could be lying. And she said, do you know why your memory keeps changing? And I think I was kind of in shock. I kind of giggle when I'm nervous, I guess. And it did, that really stuck with me for a long time because it was like, why does my memory keep changing? But over time with my psychologist, I've learned like how trauma blocks things out, which I'm sure people on this podcast have spoken about before. And I couldn't remember certain things because like in order to keep going with uni and stuff, because when this happened, I started my first year of uni. All the police interviews happened during the HSC for me. I had to block it out. It was not a conscious thing, but I had to be able to keep like functioning. I had to think it out. So I
Yeah.
guess that language of blame was really harmful for me. I remember just leaving that.
I've never heard someone say that. Like, I would never say that to a victim. It would be, and this is the thing. I know that trauma does that. It's a coping mechanism. It's a safety mechanism that the brain
100%.
has instilled so that you can survive. It's a survival mechanism. And, I've seen parents give birth to their newborn and all of the memories from their childhood come flooding back. They had no memory until the minute their first child or their child hits the age
Yeah.
they were when they were abused. And that's because up until that point, your brain is like sitting there trying to protect you. And then something happens and it triggers it all. So I'm not surprised that you're struggling to remember. I mean, especially if it was multiple occasions, multiple things happened, not more than one. I remember when I was interviewing kids that the thing I learned during then, and that may be why I have a little bit more knowledge than the average everyday police officer detective, because I learned about the fact that memories do that. But I remember we used to ask the question, when was the first time? Because usually the first time is the one that you remember the most, and the last time because you know why it stopped. And then sometimes you might get one or two occasions, especially if it was all the time or lots of times, you might get one or two occasions that were memorable because something was different to the others. So, so I would ask children, do you remember the first time? Do you remember the last time? Do you remember anything else? Is there any others that stand out? It could have been their birthday when it happened, or it could have been something else. So I don't think people realize, and I can't believe that detective used that language. Like, that's just horrendous.
Thank
I'm
you.
so sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to say that all police are like that because I'm sure that you wouldn't be like that, or
I would highly try
that's
not
not my
to.
intention, but just for my personal experience. And yeah, it can be you remember the first and the last time the most. Like you said, that definitely makes sense and can be the case. It really depends. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gobsmacked by that. And so that basically, you're on a high, you go in there, they say, we've got no evidence, we can't proceed any further. Was that them writing off the case? So is that
She
it?
gave me the option of writing it off or interviewing people that the perpetrator knew to try and get them to say, yeah, I think he would do that. But at that point, I don't know if this was the right thing, but I was like, really, I was just so upset by what she said. I don't think that they're going to be helpful. Like, why would they rat him out? Kind of thing. So I was just like, I'll just leave it. And I think maybe if she had said, maybe make sure that you're linked up with some supports today. Are you okay to like get home? Or I don't know, just it was kind of like she told me that and it was like a 5-10 minute conversation. I was out the door. Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Your case isn't going forward, but go and deal with it. I remember just like
Wow.
crying. It was like a 40-minute walk home and I was just sobbing the whole time.
Oh my gosh, Lauren, I'm so sorry. Like, this kind of thing, when I hear stories like this, I'm just like, where is the compassion and
Yeah.
empathy? Where is the, like, and I can see, I know we kind of had a small
Yeah.
conversation about this before we started, there was police officers that I worked with where I thought, you shouldn't be a police officer. And I'm not gonna, I wouldn't name anyone, but they shouldn't be in the job anymore. Like, literally, they don't care anymore. And I don't know how that happens because I cared so much
Yeah.
that it nearly killed me. I was like, but and I knew my time was up when that, obviously my mental health was so
Yeah.
damaged and stuff. But I just don't understand how people can be like that. You're working in an industry that requires empathy, compassion, and to believe people, especially when it comes to child
Yeah.
sexual abuse.
It definitely would be a hard area to work in. So I really respect all the detectives who care so much and are really compassionate. I think that goes a long way because no one's really in a child abuse detective's office because they really want to be. I personally didn't really want to report it at the time because I was so young, but you kind of had to
Mm,
because I was under 18 when, but anyway,
mm.
just having that compassion, which I'm sure you had, but it's definitely a very hard field and I don't want to take away from that. Yeah.
Don't be so nice. Like that detective was shit. She deserves a smack, like in the, in the metaphoric smack. Do you think so? From your story, do you reckon so? Your initial psychologist didn't give you the right care either. Is that what you were saying? Like they weren't very good at helping you through that process, or were they okay, but made you also doubt some of the stuff?
I think she was good. It was just some of the memories she wasn't very validating. It was kind of like dismissing, oh, I don't think that happened. But I've had amazing psychologists.
I just don't
Yeah, I don't know.
understand saying that.
My psychologist now is absolutely amazing, and I don't want to discourage people from opening up because there are psychologists who are amazing. Like my one currently has helped me so much and is the reason that I can keep going to uni and
Yeah.
kind of function like a just yeah, get through things. But she was a good psychologist. It was just dismissing memories. I don't think that was very helpful.
That's not helpful at all. No, 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 especially when you're trying to get the courage to tell people what's happened. And yeah, okay, memories are a bit tricky and they can be a bit dodgy at times. It doesn't mean, and this is the thing, right? The body, I say this to people all the time. The body remembers, like the body is the one that, the nervous system, the body, all of that stuff, whatever you remember is what you remember. It's real to you. And so it's real to you and your body. So yeah, it's really interesting. And especially when it comes to little kids, like people always said to me, I had it yesterday. Do you think that they're lying, like a 2.5-year-old lying about being touched by an adult in their family? And I was like, they're 2.5 years old.
Exactly.
How can they lie about
Exactly.
this stuff?
I don't think a kid would lie about that. And if you have doubts, just keep talking to them or try to understand because I don't think a kid would necessarily lie about something that serious.
No, well, very rarely they do. You wanted to also talk about, so I can totally see why you're so passionate about, trauma-informed care and getting like these professions need to be better informed. They need to be better trained. I 100% agree. But, you had both child on child abuse and adult on child abuse and it's interesting that you said they weren't interested in the child on child abuse because it's quite a difficult situation, right? Especially if the child is similar age to you,
Yeah.
to the victim. What's your experience with that? Like what happened
Yeah.
with all of that?
I was actually part of a study called the ABAR project last year, which focused on child sexual abuse. Um, and I met some wonderful people through that. I think I didn't have as many memories because what happened with the adult happened over the course of a few years, and this happened like not as many times. So I didn't have as many memories. So therefore, they didn't think that there was enough evidence to do anything. And I remember speaking to my psychologist in year 12 about this, and she was trying to distinguish whether it was what she called healthy child curiosity. I think that's I think that's a very harmful phrase. I don't think that kids are just experimenting because there's so many conceptions about child and child. It's not curiosity or experimenting or trying to figure things out. If a child is doing that, it's serious. I think it happens so often, child on child sexual abuse, but it's never spoken about. And part of that AVA project last year, it made me really passionate also about a group of survivors that aren't really spoken about or acknowledged because it isn't seen as serious. But even if they're a child and they're
Mm-hmm.
assaulting you, that is still very serious and should be taken seriously. So I think the police who handled my case should have looked further into that as well. Even if it doesn't happen over the space of years, it's still traumatic and serious.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree. I mean, we call it harmful sexualized behaviors in Australia, but the other thing to what you just mentioned is that there's a level of curiosity, but it has to be, it's still within the framework of like, we're not talking about toddlers just showing each other their private parts because
Yeah.
it's funny and they get a laugh out of it. We're talking about children, children performing sexual acts, children being forced into sexual acts, children having them, things done to them that they don't want done to them. When we get into that realm, and one of the things that I always say is, if we're talking about two children of a similar age and they're both wanting to do it, it has to be freely given, willing. They're not being coerced, not being bullied. Like all of these things, we're going to go, okay, well, that's normal experimentation, especially if it's age appropriate. Two 11-year-olds having their first kiss, two 13-year-olds might be starting to fool around, whatever, or a 13 and 14-year-old, whatever. When it's, an older child with a younger child, where there's a power imbalance, where there's forcing, where there's no choice, where a child feels they have to do it because they're in a locked room
Yes.
or on a sleepover, or it's a family member who's forcing this on them because and what we're seeing now with harmful sexualized behaviors and child abuse, child on child abuse, is that, the inappropriate pornography, seeing pornography, we're seeing more children harming each other or harming siblings, harming children that are in their
Yeah,
home.
for sure. Especially that power imbalance. I think that's a very important part of it. And there is a difference, like you said, between imposing sexual acts on someone rather than like I've never kissed someone before or I've never like discovering their own body. I think there's definitely a difference between that, like you said. Yeah.
Well, there is. The thing is I think the reason why police don't take child on child abuse seriously is because a lot of the times we're dealing with two children, right? So what if we go and charge and if it's reported before they're 18 and it's not historical kind of thing, well, we're dealing with two children. What is the outcome for both the victim and the abuser? Like, I saw a lot more of it towards the end of my career, so you might be able to add some from that project. I saw so much of it before the end of my career, a lot of it intrafamilial, brothers and sisters, siblings, brothers, lots of sibling sexual abuse. And you've got a
Yeah.
parent who's like, what do I do? How do I don't know what to do. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll just pretend it
Which
didn't
is
happen.
the thing that you don't do, which is the most harmful.
No, you're not meant to. But I think the thing is because we don't talk about it and because parents are stuck, they're like, I've got a child who's abused my other child, a child that is trauma. Like, and generally, I don't know your experience, but generally the child that was the victim is quiet, doesn't want to say anything, doesn't want to upset anyone, is,
Yeah.
submissive, passive. They're not fighting. They're not the child that's, and I mean, I might be generalizing here, but the child that's maybe harmed that child is the more boisterous child, the one that's got like a little bit more control over the family or takes up more energy. So, like all of the time and energy gets put on the child that's abused versus the child that was abused.
Yeah, I mean, my experience wasn't within the family, but I can't imagine how difficult that situation would be, especially with differing personalities. Yeah, parents not knowing what to do, I've heard that's quite a common thing, but what parents should do is not just ignore it and throw it under the rug. Yeah, it's really tough, especially in a family environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And and then you're dealing with, I mean, sadly, a lot of the times, child on child abuse, there's no one who gets charged, no one who gets but then there's no help either because police can't refer you to a
Yeah.
victim support service or a counselling and there's
No.
so little services
Yeah,
out there.
I was very lucky in that adult on child, I think, is a bit more widely understood. Like I was able to access victim support scheme, which helped me receive ongoing counselling. But I think it's so difficult when there's two children. It just makes prosecution and charging even harder when it's that outcome isn't great when it's adult and child either, but it just adds another layer of difficulty and
Layer.
even more trauma if there's two kids because that's so confusing and you might not have even realized what had happened until years later, which then it's even harder to have an outcome.
Yeah, I spoke to a sibling. So In America, they call it incest, obviously, when it's family, interfamilial, sibling on sibling, or etc. And in Australia, we just use child sexual abuse as the generic term for any type of sexual abuse. Do you think that in Australia, we need to change terminology or need to sharpen up the terms that we're using to help people understand it better? Or what's your thoughts on
Good
all of that?
question. I think child sexual abuse, I think that's a good term, but it's very broad. I think if we want more awareness, there needs to be more campaigns with child on child, I guess, using that terminology, being a little bit more specific, or adult on
Mm,
child, because I think child sexual abuse, you probably think
yeah.
more of adult on child than child on child. So maybe using that
Yes.
terminology and harmful sexual behavior as well. I think that's the term that the ABAR project used, and you mentioned that earlier. Just putting it for what it is rather than beating around the bush, I guess, if we can label it for what it is. And that can be difficult because it's really uncomfortable for people to hear or even fathom that kids can do that to each other.
Yeah.
If we can say it for what it is and be specific and target child on child sexual abuse specifically, that would be very helpful. And just calling it for what it is, because I've heard
Mm,
terminology in the news like teacher has relationship with child or like oh child has relationship with child, which
I know.
is
How useless is that?
just really harmful behavior because a child cannot consent to having a relationship, quote unquote, with a teacher. It's grooming, it's assault, it's abuse, it's rape in some cases. So we definitely should be changing the language to call it out for what it is. And you can't have a relationship with someone so much older. But I hear that in the news all the time. I really wish that language would. Yeah,
So
it's
frustrating. How
definitely frustrating. I hope that answers.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I think not that, and I'm in two minds. I don't know enough about your situation with the child abuse to comment on your situation, but I'm in two minds because when we're dealing with children, especially, prepubescent children more so than pubescent children, if they've had proper education, that's why I'm so
Yes.
passionate about body safety education, and because I saw so many children obviously acting inappropriately, behaving inappropriately, almost and abusing
Yeah.
other children without that foundational education that might have prevented it. They might have prevented them from harming another child if they had that educational background, if they had that education in their lives. But on the flip side of that, other children might have come forward and it might have been reduced. The harm might have been reduced if they had that background. So I'm really passionate about
Yes,
body
and that
safety
is
education.
such an important point. And I saw you do cards. I think and all that work is so important because for me, in both cases, I was preschool age. So young, you don't understand. Well, at least I didn't. I'm sure most kids don't understand what is appropriate and what isn't. And if it's someone that you know and you trust, you're more likely to just, I don't know, think it's normal. It happens so many times. Or you're just like, this is normal. But
Yeah,
it's just what they do.
it's just what they do.
Like calling like saying vagina and penis, like being more open about it and maybe speaking to kids about what is appropriate and what isn't from a very young age. And I'm sure that's a very uncomfortable thing to do if kids are so young. Like, how is it appropriate to be speaking to them about this? It's just, it can happen very young. And if kids sort of know what is appropriate and what isn't, which is what the amazing work you do with body safety, especially for young kids, that's so important. Because I think if I knew what was right from what was wrong, I could have known that it was wrong because I had no idea. I was so young and said something, even though when you're a kid, you can't be expected to. Like, it's very scary if you're
No.
with someone you trust or a family friend, which was the case for my child on child. You don't know that it's wrong. But if you have that education very young, that can be so helpful. I think it would have helped me. And I know I've spoken to a lot of survivors. I know that that would have been very helpful for them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I learnt from my years of interviewing children, talking to families, you know, talking to survivors, adult survivors, a lot of that abuse especially when it's before they start school. And a lot of survivors are abused
Yeah,
before school age, or before they actually hit that. But then, if they had have had that information, they might have spoken up beforehand, and they might have spoken up. It might have just, the first instance might have happened, or it might have happened, but they would have said something sooner and that harm would have been reduced. And I guess the next part to that and part of the education process is
yeah,
educating adults that, when a child talks to you and says something, you have to
100%.
believe them. You can't just say things like, why is your memory, why don't you remember? Hello, like, I think you're making this up. Like, I could slap that
Yeah,
psychologist because kids don't make this, there's a lot that can be said about children's imaginations, but, you know, they don't imagine this stuff up, especially before school age, and they don't make it up. And yeah, okay, there's the odd occasion of someone who says something and they say it but there's always some semblance of truth to
yeah,
everything someone says. So, it's just got to find the
100%.
unpack it all
Even if you
and find it.
don't,
So yeah.
like, ask them more. It's better to be safe and just, if they say something, just like, can you like explain that to me? Or just asking them further questions, because it's better, in any case, it's better to ask and try and help them rather than just be like, oh, they're probably lying, they're too young to understand that or for them to have happened. Because I know a lot of cases, like
Mm.
parents or teachers or whoever can't really fathom that happening. So they kind of just dismiss it because it's like, it can happen, but you don't think that it's
Yeah.
someone that is in your family or someone in your class or whatever it is.
Close.
Close to you,
Yeah, or
exactly.
close to you,
It
or
just
someone,
ask them more questions. It's better to try and believe the victim than be like dismissing it because in a way that's like
hmm
perpetuating the system of perpetrators being believed in a way. If you don't believe the victim, even if
Yeah.
they're young, just try and understand more. And if they say concerning things, there can be behaviors,
Yeah.
like little
Yeah.
signs, which is very hard to pick up on, but it's better to be safe and to ask than to just dismiss it. Yeah.
100%. I just, you mentioned behaviors, and a lot of the time there is behaviors that match what they're trying to tell someone. The behaviors are
Exactly.
actually what they show first. And sometimes they won't ever say anything, they won't ever say anything to someone, but the behavior is there to show that there was something going on the
Exactly.
whole time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Did you show any behaviors do you remember if you had any behaviors that you were trying to tell back in when it happened or after it happened with your abuse? Were you trying to tell someone through behavior, or did you change in behavior that you remember?
I can't remember specific behaviors. Honestly, I don't think I was aware that it was wrong. I think I was very
Mm-hmm.
like cheeky. My mum has so many stories of me being younger, just getting up to a lot of mischief. But after things happened, I think she has later said that she remembers that I became a bit more anxious and reserved, like behavioral changes. I don't think, like, I know some kids can play inappropriately with toys or things like that, like signs. I don't know if I did that. I
Yeah.
think it's just my personality changed. Like, I became a lot more quiet and nervous and anxious rather than just being silly and
Mm,
boisterous.
the
Yeah,
happy
exactly.
cheeky
Just, I
kid.
think maybe personality changes. In me, I know that there are physical signs in other people, but I think for me it was just personality. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it's so difficult. Like it's such a difficult thing, and but as a parent,
Yeah.
you know your children, right? So you should be listening, should be fine. Like you just have to spend some time to understand why, where, what's happening. Because eventually, like you said, just get curious about what's happening and changing for your children or what your child. So you're working with so many things, like you're helping survivor groups and you're working with all of these other places. Has that given you a sense of purpose with regards to? I mean, you obviously, weren't you weren't given the greatest experience by the police, and you weren't, you obviously haven't been able to go down the prosecution pathway. But in helping other people's lifeline and what you're wearing and stuff like that, are you finding some sense of peace in with regards to that? Sorry, my words are not coming out. Are you
That's
finding
okay.
some sort of peace?
I definitely think so. I think psychology in undergrad is very like theoretical, and it was because I'm so passionate about this. I'm like, is there any volunteering I can do, or just I'm looking to volunteer at a women's shelter, for example, just things like that. I think I can't change what happened to me, but I can kind of help people who might be struggling and in a situation. But I think I'll be able to help more once I'm a bit more trained. But
Yeah, you're still early
yeah,
on
I
in
think
your
it
journey.
just I can't really change what happened to me, but if I can help other people, that kind of gives me a bit of peace of mind. Um, and it gives me purpose.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're struggling a bit, so you're like, what can I do realistically to make myself deal with this or come to terms with it? And I think giving back is a way to help, and trying going on podcasts like
Yeah.
this, or because with the ABAR project as well last year, that was focusing on child and child sexual abuse. Just if I can spread awareness as well, just to make sure
Mm,
that kids are dealt with a bit better and don't have a horrible process through the policing system, I think that
experience.
gives me peace of mind for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is that obviously, it was quite some time after the child on child abuse happened that you disclosed because you were talking to a safe person. Obviously, you felt safe with your psychologist, and then, you disclosed the adult on child abuse as well. Do you think that, what kind of tips or hints or advice could you give parents in regards to any of that? So I guess from your perspective, when you look back on what happened as a child, no one knew it was happening because you didn't know it was happening. So we talked about body safety. That's one of the things. Is there anything else you want to add to that on how parents can like protect their kids, from either child on child abuse or adult on child abuse, or, what's your take
That's a
on all
good
of that?
question. I really was trying to think about that before I came on because I know that there might be a lot of parents listening. In my particular situation, firstly for signs, I think if a kid is particularly close with an adult, like I was really attached to this person because I was told that I was their special person. Like there can be signs of grooming if a child becomes really attached all of a sudden to someone in an unhealthy way and feels really nervous when they're without them. Obviously that can be very innocent, but just keeping an eye on that, and that could be a sign of something different. If your child is showing signs like being like making their dolls play inappropriately or saying concerning things like things about sex or something that's really not age appropriate, maybe just asking them more rather than just being like, oh my gosh, you can't say that. Why'd you just say that to me? So I think there's like signs. In terms of disclosure, it can be really difficult, especially in a family setting or if the perpetrator is known to the family, to try and sweep it under the rug, which I think with my case it was more that they had their back than mine. I think asking the child, is there anything I can do to help you? Not pushing them to say things, saying, I believe you. If we can cut contact with this person, just saying that you believe them and trying not to sweep it under the rug for the sake of making people happy, or I don't think that person can handle what happened to you, so we'll just not mention it to them, or I don't want you speaking out about this. It can be really difficult if it's known to the family. Just trying to be supportive and have the child's back because they're dealing with so much already. If it's being reported to police, they're probably going through a lot. Just being there for them and try not to sweep it under the rug would be my biggest thing because that can be so harmful. Just looking out for signs, mainly inquiring
Mm,
more if there's really worrying things that they're doing, and just having the kids back is what I would say. And protecting them.
mm,
If there's someone that you know that they've said is harming me, don't see them, which is
yeah.
it's so common sense, but it can be difficult if you've known this person for a long time. Like in my case, my family kept seeing this person even after I disclosed it. My psychologist had to be like, you shouldn't be seeing this person. You shouldn't be wanting Lauren to see this
Yeah.
person. You just have to try and make it as safe as possible for them. If that means cutting out someone that you've known for ages, that is so hard. And I don't want to take away from how hard that is, but you just got to show that you have their back and you want to know more, and don't push them to say things. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, and you got to remember, like, your
They're children.
children, like, they're children. The victims of this are children. It's our job as adults
Yeah,
and parents to protect them from that, you know. It's not a child's job to take on the burden of what's happened to them because they never
100%. And
asked
I
for
think
it.
if someone said, like, because I took this on for so long, I was like, it's my fault that my family doesn't have a relationship with this person and everyone's becoming estranged, this person that meant so much to them. I really blamed myself a lot for that. But I think if you can reinforce to the kid, it's not your fault. This is not something that you asked for. And
You've
because
done.
this horrible thing has happened, we want to keep you safe. I think if you can shift the blame to the
Mm,
right person and not on the kid, it can be really hard to approach this, but if you can try and say, like, it's not your fault, we want to do this because we love you and we want to protect you.
mm,
Just shifting the blame to the right place, I think that would have been very helpful. But it's hard for parents. Like, I don't think my parents were ever expecting this to happen. I think they're still shocked, and it's been a few years,
mm.
but just showing the kids, yeah,
They also, there's no
it's so
handbook
hard.
for
There's
all
no
of this stuff
handbook. Yeah,
either. That's why No, and that's why that's why I have this podcast. This is why I
yeah,
talk with victim survivors. This is why I talk about this stuff, because just to have an idea of how because I don't know about your parents' generation, but my parents' generation was like, sweep it
100%.
on the rug, pretend it hasn't happened. Everyone's happy families. Let's all pretend. And that gets us nowhere except for into more psychology and potentially,
Yeah,
self-medicating with other things, and that's why most of our parents were self-medicating. I joke about that, but they were all self-medicating. The other thing I wanted to ask was, you know, I guess you've pretty much covered all of that. You've covered how to prevent it, what to look out for, how to deal with disclosures, and just, you know, in your situation, it wasn't a great experience with police. Do you think that anything else would have helped other than the police's reaction could have been better, and they could have taught, even if there was not enough evidence, they could have delivered that news to you easier? Less traumatizing way of delivering it. Like, hey, we've looked at every avenue. We've spoken to the DPP. They don't think that there's going to be enough evidence. I'm so sorry. Maybe we can, if something more comes up in the later period, we'll be able to do more. But thank you. How can we help you, just support you whilst this is going on?
yeah.
Would
I
that have
think it's
helped?
just I was talking about this with my psychologist after it happened. It's just, I'm sure the police are like they don't know what to do, but I think just changing the phrasing. At the moment, we don't have enough evidence, but that's not because of anything that you've done. It's just like a
We
historical
don't believe you.
case. It's really hard to get solid, quote unquote, evidence through court. And just explaining that that doesn't mean that it didn't happen to you. It doesn't take away that, and I
Yep.
know that that must be disappointing. Is there anyone you can speak to? Like, is there a psychologist you can,
Can we
yeah,
contact
is there
anyone for
anything I can
you?
help? Exactly.
How can we support you? You're so right. If they had have said it like that, that would have, like, yeah, you would have been devastated, but you wouldn't have felt like they don't believe
Yeah,
me. They think I'm a
100%.
liar. Like, so ridiculous that they said that to you. That makes me so mad. But yeah, that's definitely one of the things. But I was wondering, like, more about, if did you receive that information on your own? Like, do you think that as a victim survivor, going back as an adult, like the fact that you were an adult and stuff like that, or you were a teen, having a support person, having someone that when you're doing this stuff, you get like an
That's such a good
advocate
point.
in to help you,
Yeah,
or,
having a support
you know,
person. It'd be good
yeah.
if they had a support person that was mental health and trauma informed in some way. Like, you can debrief with them. That's a good point, actually.
Maybe that's a service that we desperately
Yeah,
need for these
I think
cases.
so. With kids, I mean, anyone really. How old was I? Like 18? I think you're technically an adult, but you still do need that support. Even years later than me,
You're still
having
not.
that support, checking in with the person, that would be a great service that I know that in court there can be advocates. I think I've read that, but that's like court. But if going through the police system, if there's
Yeah.
any support person during that process, that would also be helpful, not just in court, because that takes so long. Like, I remember them saying it would take months or even years to get to court, and even then there's like a very slim chance of them being prosecuted. I mean convicted, sorry.
I
Yeah.
know. It's terrible.
A support person would be great.
What if we, this just popped into my head and it's just a random thought. Like, where was I the other day? Even the airport in Perth, right? So I'm over in Western Australia. Even the airport in Perth has volunteers that help people. The zoo has volunteers that help people. I'm trying to think, there was some place, the hospital has volunteers that help people. Imagine if we had volunteers that were like volunteering at the police station that were like advocate specialists, trauma-informed specialists that, if someone came in and went to report something and was given bad news, that they could like, here's where you can go and here's
Yes.
what you can do and here's how we can support, like, here's the support you can get. And, the police officer who's really busy could say, hey, look, I've got to go to the next job, but here is Kristi. She's going to talk you through all of the options for support and just make sure that you get home safely or make sure you're okay today before we leave you. I mean, look, that's a far-fetched idea, but I'm just thinking, like so many people could use just that little bit of a kind, warm touch before they have to walk out of a police
And it
station.
shouldn't be far-fetched. I think, like you said, if there's volunteers for things that are less scary, like being at a police station is really terrifying at any age.
It's scary.
And just afterwards, making sure that the person is safe. Like, thank God I'm safe. I don't have contact with that person. But it was just like, oh, okay, we can't go through the court. Okay, see you later. But like checking in on that person, what if something had happened and the person found out that I reported them? Like, that is so dangerous. Like, if there's any way to check on the person afterwards from a safety standpoint, like I was speaking about well-being a lot, like in the moment, but like follow up with them, ask in the meeting, we can't take you through to court, but is there anything we can do to help you feel more safe or any safeguards we can put in place? Like, that also should be like common sense.
And you're right. Yeah, like I've never like really considered it. I did and I didn't. Like I used to, if I gave someone the news that you got, I'd be like, I'm so sorry. Like we just can't get enough evidence. It's not something that we think that will be able to go through court. It might not even get that far. If further evidence comes up, like we will definitely reconsider it. We can open the file again, but for now we're going to have to close the file and just wait and hope that something more comes. I have a terrible story about this because I nearly wrote a file off and it was intrafamilial child abuse with an actual parent actually. And I had tried really hard, like I'd got the child's statement, like the interview, I'd interviewed the mum, I'd interviewed all of these other people, but there was not enough evidence. Like looking at it, it was just because they couldn't pinpoint, like the memories weren't great, similar. And I thought, nah, for sure I'm going to have to write this off because it's just not enough. And then the day that it was a Friday afternoon, the day that I was about to write it off, I got another file across my desk that was for the same offender of another child. And I went, I know. And it was like literally like the universe plopped this freaking file on my desk and I feel totally bad about it, but I cheered. Like I was like, yes. Because I believed this child and I knew she'd been abused. I knew that this person had done it to her. And then, I got this secondary file that just basically, and it was a completely different family, no relation. It just happened and it was just like handed to me. And then in the end, when I further interviewed other children around, like, I did my work and interviewed everyone around in the circle of this family, there was another child that came forward and it was the older brother of this initial victim. And yeah, so, like the thing is that it just because I know how it feels to have to write these things off, but sometimes, someone will come forward a few years later and same with your file. Who's to say that a few years from now, 10 years from now, someone else doesn't come forward and they decide to reopen your file because they're like, well, now we've got someone else. It shouldn't be this way, but it is because the system's the way it is. It's not set up for survivors and victims at all. So
yeah, and you're so right. I think I can't remember the exact statistic, but like adult perpetrators have on average like 7 victims or something. Like it's statistically likely that there's more than one victim. So in that case, obviously it's not good that there are more victims, like you said, but if multiple people are coming forward about the same offender, which is the case a lot of the time, there's multiple victims, that can be very helpful for cases. And I'm really glad that, obviously not that it happened to another person, but there's two people who aren't connected who are saying
No.
the same thing about the same person. Like, that is pretty
Yeah.
damning for the perpetrator.
Yeah. I think he ended up he ended
Oh,
up pleading guilty. So to 3 victims,
there
3
you
of
go.
multiple offences. He ended up pleading guilty because to go to
Very
trial on that,
traumatic.
it probably would have, he
Yeah.
would have had to fight pretty hard. But the thing is that it's just nuts that the system's the way it is. It's what pushed me out of the police. The system is so wrought with problems, and thinking about that support service as you leave the station, I'm like, oh, why haven't we put something in like that in place? And yeah, I might make some noise about that. But other than what you're doing, so you're working with what you were wearing, you're working with Lifeline, which is an amazing service for people who, obviously going through mental health challenges. You're studying. What do you do for fun for you, for Lauren?
I love going out with friends. I'm doing Latin dancing at the moment, which is really fun. I'm trying to get back into
Wow.
reading. I definitely, like, I know my life is kind of all mental health and um, advocacy and stuff, but I do still like to have fun with my friends. And yeah, Latin dancing has actually been really
Yeah.
healing in some way because, I mean, I've got part South American heritage as well, so and it's very like
Yeah.
it's kind of like an intimate thing in a way, like the way that you dance with people, and in a way, like, it was really hard
Yeah.
for me at first, but it's actually been really healing, and being able to meet guys and trust guys again. I think
Yeah.
not every guy is a potential perpetrator. I think I had to kind of change the way I thought, but yeah, I love my
Yes.
pet, my auntie's pet. So, and like seeing shows and stuff, like, I definitely have things that I can balance this with. Um,
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that because, the impacts of child sexual abuse last forever, but we get to choose how we process it, heal from it, move through it, do what we do with it. And every time we do something that brings us joy, makes us smile, makes us feel good, gives us that feeling inside our chest, that expansion of like fun and happiness, we're winning. Like, you're winning, like, keep doing all of those things and remember that you can't, the age old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I'm glad that you're doing some stuff for you as well, because you're already
Thank
giving
you.
back so much to the
Thank you.
community
You
in what
too.
you're doing. Well, thank you so much for chatting to me, Lauren. I really appreciate you. And yeah, just keep working hard. And I know that you've got a few years to go in your psychology degree, but it'll be here before you know it. And then you'll be doing all sorts of other cool things with it. But it's one of those degrees that feels like forever, I'm sure. And then when it's here, you're like, whoa, that went fast.
Thank you so much, and I'm really grateful to be able to speak today. So thank you for your time and everything that you do. I'm sure you're helping lots of people. Yeah.
You're an amazing
Thank
young
you.
woman,
Thanks for your
Lauren. Thank
time.
you. Thank you for listening to this episode. Education empowers children, strengthens parents, and most importantly, prevents abuse. That's why I do this work, and that's why you're here. So truly, thank you. If you'd like more support or resources, follow me on social media under Kristi McVie or Cape-AU, where you'll find all the links in the show notes. You can also grab a copy of my book, Operation KidSafe, A Detective's Guide to Child Abuse Prevention at www.cape-au.com, where you'll find further resources and self-paced courses to help you in this journey of protecting your kids. If you found this episode valuable, please take a moment to leave a review or share it with someone important. Your support helps more parents and caregivers discover this important information and take action to keep kids safe. Check the show notes for extra links and support. And most importantly, thank you for showing up and taking action to protect your kids. See you next time.